So one of the key things that we found in this piece of research was that those organizations that appeared to be more resilient than others, that responded really well to crisis events, is that they discussed future failure well before the event or the disruption hit. One of the most predictable responses I think that we see to a crisis when people look back is say, well, why didn't we see this coming? One of the key things in our perspective is that these complex and severe events are often a failure of imagination. People just don't imagine that it could happen to them. They often think that they are different in some way, or the probability of the event is so low that they don't need to make the preparations for it. I think what we see in resilient organizations is a mindset that's kind of got this healthy uneasiness. They ask, what if? They then ask, what next? There's an assumption in the organization that failures or disruptions will occur at some point in time, and therefore they build that preparedness to disruptions, often not really specifying what that disruption might be, but there is a recognition at some point in time that they will be disrupted. What we also see is often people in the organization do see the warning signs, some of the weak signals, but are not able to either speak up or they're not listened to in those organizations. In the resilient ones, what we see is that everyone's got that state of vigilance. They've got that situational awareness. They're able to speak up, and therefore the organization can act very early to these disruptions and events.
Yeah, and I think, David, you've drawn out some really important points there. You know, in the past, people have often thought about events as being low probability and therefore not always put the attention to them. I think there's a movement that's happening to say, actually, we need to think about impact more than but the probability of these events and judge it in that way. I think the other thing, you know, and if we look at what the financial sector regulators are telling financial institutions to do, is to expect disruptions to happen. They are inevitable. So again, they're taking the probability out of this and saying, let's focus on the disruption happening. The other thing they're quite focused on is using scenarios. They talk about severe but plausible scenarios, and using those to examine what the effect of disruption would be. And it's interesting, I think I've referred to it previously in one of our sessions, the Futures Thinking Toolkit that's come out from Go Science, and it provides an excellent sort of toolkit of ways of looking at not just disruption events, but future world and how the organization is set and how it can become more resilient to changes in the world in the future. And I think these are all really important aspects. And, you know, if I say, this is the start point for becoming more resilient. If you don't discuss future failure, you don't embrace future thinking, it's hard to get the culture and the mindset in the organization right to then address resilience downstream from there.
In the research, what we found were those organizations were using these future thinking tools, these foresight tools, and they were also doing pre-mortems. So we often do a post-mortem after an event to look back at why it happened, but they were often using these pre-mortems to put themselves in the future and say, how might our new initiative, our new program, our introduction of new technology, how might that fail? How might that have an impact? And then work back from there to look at how they build resilience for it in the future. What we also find is that those tools are not only used to identify the future problems and to stop these bad events happening, but they also can be used to drive innovation and really see the opportunities for future growth in the organization.